Hello, everyone, and welcome to GitHub Galaxy. We're here for day one. We're very excited to have you with us. And we've been keeping an eye on the chat, and we've been loving seeing all of the GIFs, all of the conversations, and really getting a feeling of the diversity, I guess, that we have across the region here. So thank you for joining us here today. My name is Chris Reddington. I'm a senior manager at GitHub. I work with many enterprises, startups, and other people who use GitHub day to day for their work. And we're really excited to be talking with you today all about the secret to writing high quality code efficiently, which is such an important topic. When we think about the world we live in, expectations have never been higher in terms of quality, making sure that the apps that we ship, the services that we ship are top quality. So we're excited to be sharing some tips and tricks here with you today. Before we jump into the session, and we've got a really great session here today as well, by the way, a number of great guests. I just want to run through some quick Q&A just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that you can really enjoy the session here. So if you've got a question, there is a Q&A tab on the panel on the right-hand side, so please do go and use that. And we've got some moderators who will be keeping an eye on that and bringing those to our attention. Chat moderators are here to assist. And of course, if there's anything interesting throughout the session, maybe you'd like to explore a little bit further, have a one-on-one discussion a little bit later on, please feel free to schedule a meeting. There's a button on the top of your screen where you'll be able to go ahead and do that. If you have been having some issues, I did see some comments in the chat there about people having issues in terms of the chat being slow and content, etc. Please use Chrome. Chrome is the recommended browser for this particular service, this particular application. So any issues, please try that. And of course, if you are seeing issues, refresh the stream and you should be good there then. Any other troubles, if there's VPNs or other things that might be running on your devices, maybe try disabling those. That might be interfering with the service there as well. So just keep that in mind. And any other issues, there are some great troubleshooting docs out there available as well for you to go and use. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. Let's go and get kicked off with the session here. So we have some incredible folks here to join today. We're going to have Zoë Bosschaart from Ahold Delhaize, Adriaan Knapen from Eficode, and Sherin Mirza from Shell to talk about their own experiences and how they have been adopting GitHub in their organizations and how they're building quality into everything that they do. So in terms of the session, we've got a number of different areas we're going to be exploring. We're going to take some tangents along the way where there's questions that come up as well. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get Zoë, Adrian, and Sherin in here to come and introduce themselves. So let's start with Zoë yourself.
Yes, hi guys. I'm Zoë. I'm a cloud engineer from the Netherlands working at Albert Heijn Technology. And Albert Heijn Technology is part of Ahold Delhaize. And for those who don't know, Ahold Delhaize is one of the largest food retail groups and the leader in supermarkets and e-commerce. So yeah, I'm happy to share my my talk with you.
Excellent. And we're very pleased to have you with us here, Zoë. Thank you for joining us here today. Next up, Adrian.
Cool. Hello, I'm Adrian. I'm a senior DevOps consultant at Eficode. At Eficode, we focus on delivering consultancy around DevOps to help our customers improve their software delivery capabilities. We do things like consultancy on migrating to GitHub and how to get the most out of it. Managed services around having GitHub Enterprise as a self-hosted service managed by us. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And last but by no means least, Sherin.
Hello, I'm Sherin Mirza. I'm the Competency Center lead for full stack development, which is part of software engineering organization at Shell. And I'm Houston based. And I'm very glad to be at this, how we were able to deliver quality software.
Excellent. Thank you very much, folks. So let's just maybe ground the discussion before we start thinking about some of the questions and discussions we want to jump into. We're in this world now where cloud has taken over. Quality is super important. Like, as individual consumers of apps, if there's downtime of my favorite game, my favorite retail service, my favorite app, I just go and look elsewhere now. And quality is one of those things that we've really come to expect in the day-to-day, in everything that we do. So let's maybe start with at the beginning and think about some of the challenges that you were having. So what were the challenges that started you along this path and thinking about investing in quality across your organization? Zoe, maybe let's start with yourself.
Yes, well, as Ahold Delhaize is a really big enterprise company, you can imagine that we have a lot of developers working on more or less the same stuff. And I would say that working in a lot of different teams, well, there were quite some silos, people working on the same things, trying to invent the same wheel there. And the challenge was to bring that all together and starting to optimize that in an inner source model. That was basically the biggest challenge, getting everyone together and optimize everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, that whole idea of reinventing the wheel, many people making duplicate things all that do something suspiciously similar, when you could be maybe working together, doing something more efficient and building something greater than the sum of its parts is absolutely a common challenge. So thanks for sharing that one, Zoe. Sherin, maybe to yourself next.
Yeah, our initial challenges were how to deal with so many version controls in place, right? Typically, for a bigger organization like Shell, having multiple version controls adds a lot more complexity and creates a barrier in terms of how we better collaborate. And also, there is a lot of duplication or redundancy, and everybody is trying to reinvent the wheel, right? And that is not an efficient way how we build the software. And it is also very hard to embed the software engineering best practices at a consistent manner so that teams could deliver high quality, secure, reliable solutions at a much faster pace in a DevOps style. So these were the initial challenges we faced.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for sharing there, Sherin. And it's interesting, we've just got a poll on screen here now asking how many tools are folks using in their organization day to day. And it sounds like, so far at least, and we'll give it maybe a few more seconds, there's an interesting split. A lot of folks are saying 1 to 5, so fewer tools, but there's still a mix. You know, there's some where there's actually 5 to 10 and some 10 plus. And I think that spread of different tools needing to integrate everything together can really impact some of those quality challenges, because you start having to think about the plumbing between all of these different things and the handoff between these different points as well. So some very interesting insights here. Adrian, maybe let's move over to yourself and some of the trends you see from various customers you're working with.
Yeah, so since we are as consultants, we see a lot of these snowflakes. And one of the kind of common things is that, like, even after migration to a specific tool, kind of teams are still kind of stuck with the old tools and the old way of working, and they don't really yet embrace this new way of developing. And this kind of culture shift you need afterwards is really necessary to get the entire organization to actually kind of follow in the transition that the organization is trying to achieve. And half of the times it's that just it's just a way of kind of framing it and getting the organization aware that the tools have changed and that there's a new way of working and that it actually helps them at the end of the day and that it makes them more productive, rather than that it's something which costs them now something that they need to invest in changing their ways of working, and that is only a blocker. So the moment they see the moment they feel empowered, that's the moment you kind of buy the organization, and you just need to get a couple of these stories around to kind of took everyone along.
Absolutely. I think what we're talking about here, right, is really cultural change to a degree when I'm thinking of all of the different themes I've heard so far. It's not just about the tooling change and bringing some of that quality into what we're doing, but there's this cultural change. I think, Zoe, you mentioned about this inner source culture as well, and being able to bring everyone into this open world that we work in rather than these closed silos. So maybe Sherin, to start us off with here, I guess there's been a lot of change that you probably needed to think about in that transition. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I think bringing such a huge cultural change and also the technical excellence, how we adopt inner source cannot happen overnight. But what we have done at Shell is we created an inner source guild that allows the practitioners to form multiple inner source communities based on the technology stack, whether you are doing infrastructure as code or you are doing full stack development or even data science and data engineering. Having these inner source communities will help the practitioners to get close to the subject matter experts. And these inner source communities are also responsible for maintaining the inner source assets that are solely built on that reusable concept. I think that really helped in terms of adopting some of these inner source assets so that product teams don't have to reinvent the wheel. If somebody has already done it, they could reuse that code or libraries and be productive and do it much more faster. But what is more important is the quality of those inner source assets is even more important because that is reused all across the organization. That's where we have created a lot of inner source readiness checks and bots that will allow you to identify whether it meets the quality criteria that this asset can be consumed by the rest of the practitioners.
Interesting. No, thank you for sharing that, Sharon. I think there's some really interesting insights in what you said there, and also looking at the poll here as well. I've been watching the results come in, and it's been quite balanced between people either doing inner source or not doing inner source. So just in case folks aren't aware, the idea of inner source is really this concept of bringing open source practices, open source principles, and using them inside your day-to-day development. So rather than having different teams operate in silos, you operate a bit like open source communities do. They work openly, they work transparently, they are global in nature, they are distributed, they work asynchronously, all of these kind of things, remotely as well, are principles and practices that we start bringing into how we work day to day. So getting rid of, almost those closed walls of development and building something bigger and better and greater for the community. So better than the sum of our parts. So let's maybe jump on and move on from that conversation, maybe to yourself, Zoe, because I suppose to get this kind of community from an inner source perspective, we saw a little bit earlier, there's some variety in tooling in terms of where folks are using today. Tooling and non-standardized tooling can be a little bit of a challenge, I suppose, to adopting this kind of community.
Yes, so when we were starting our inner source journey, especially on the cloud platform that we were building, standardized tooling helps a lot when trying to achieve effective inner source community. And what really helps is that we have within Ahold Delhaize, we have one global GitHub organization where all code is stored and everybody in that organization is able to read all that code. So you easily can do a code search if you want to look something up, to see if somebody else already did it, contact that person, which makes the journey a lot easier. Also adopting and trying to change the culture instead of people emailing us with a question, motivating them to either raise a pull request to request certain infra code, or raise a feature request through issues. So for that change, that culture change of starting to work with the inner source model, tooling is something that helps a lot.
Love it. Love it. And I couldn't have said it any better than what you just said there. I think there's really this empowerment, isn't there, for the developer community within a source. You're able to work together. Like the example you gave about pull request versus email, I've seen this in so many organizations I've worked with where it's really this cultural transformation as well. People get a bit nervous sometimes that maybe their code is readable for people in the company, and suddenly, they feel a bit vulnerable in that sense. But it's absolutely a cultural change, and many good benefits that come from that as well. It's interesting seeing the chat. Actually, I've seen some folks talk about the Inner Source Commons as well, which is one of these neutral organizations that focus on sharing practices and ideas of different organizations that have used and adopted Inner Source. So definitely one to go and check out there. So thank you for sharing that, Niall. Adrian, let's maybe finish this up with yourself here. So that process from going maybe from multiple tools or that previous kind of world into this kind of Inner Source world and starting to standardize some of those tooling, what are maybe some of the common pitfalls that you've seen across the customers you've worked with?
Well, it often kind of turns out that it's not as easy as you hope it to be. Like there are always these implicit dependencies, which is kind of a form of technical debt, where just teams spin up their own, Artifactory instance, which is chugging along somewhere happy. And even worse, if someone forgets to pay the bill on time and just the team gets locked out. Heard horror stories of that, where middle of summer you suddenly get this escalation. But it only makes visible that you have these dependencies, and that hurts. But that you do need to resolve them at some point, like sooner or later. So even though it might hurt in the short term, in the long term, you will kind of like have now this standardized tooling solution, which makes it easy to adopt these new tools. And you kind of get rid of all this, technical debt you've silently been building up in the background, depending on these like wide range of like different services where no one actually knows what you're using.
Absolutely. Gotcha. Understood. And I'm just keeping following the chat here as well. And a little bit of a tangent, but I'll take us there for a moment. There's a question about, is there a story about code going from Inner Source to an open source journey? And there is. If anyone's heard of this small tool application called Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Code actually originally started as an Inner Source project inside Microsoft from a number of different teams. And rather than making competing separate editors, what they did is they collaborated on top of something called the Monaco editor. And then that eventually became what we know as Visual Studio Code today. And much of that is open sourced and available. So it's a great question. And there really is this synergy between Inner Source and open source and kind of bringing both together there. So great question in the chat there. Thank you for raising. So then let's maybe move on. We've talked about, I guess, the themes in terms of, I suppose, what those early challenges were. What were those early wins then? Because I think when we're going on this transformation, showcasing some value, showcasing some wins is so, so important. So let's maybe stick with yourself here, Adrian, actually. What are some of those initial wins, maybe the value of having that single integrated platform there?
Yeah, so I think with the single platform, it's already mentioned earlier, it's very easy to kind of start using different services very easily, but also, and that's made me a bit on like how like GitHub Actions kind of rethinks how you build CI workflows. It makes it very easy to build these reusable components, these reusable workflows, and kind of get standardized code quality analysis and standardized ways to do CI/CD throughout your organization without everyone just writing their 2, 3, 4, 5,000 lines Jenkins files, which just works in one repository. You can kind of encapsulate these best practices and make sure that the entire organization can start using those.
For sure. And I guess there's an interesting kind of challenge there, isn't there, based on what we were talking earlier. If we don't have that standardized kind of tooling and approach and platform, trying to bring some of those recommended practices at scale is just really going to be a barrier and going to be challenging, because if everyone is using different underlying platforms, we can't start helping people centrally empower, let's say. And I think we'll talk a bit later in terms of like guardrails and how you empower versus control and govern. So we'll leave that one aside for now, but it's such an interesting point there, Adrian. Thanks for sharing that. Sherin, maybe to yourself, from your journey, what were some of those early wins that you saw in terms of that journey and transformation to quality?
Yeah. So in terms of adopting software engineering best practices, right? Are we delivering high quality products, reducing the rework? If the team is adopting a developer platform that can allow easily to build a solution starting from inception all the way until deployment, with less complexity to integrate with a lot more tools, then you improve the efficiency and productivity of the team. The way we were able to do it is we were able to auto provision user access and also auto provision creation of repositories and also how they can integrate with code quality and security analysis. That easily helped the team to build those controls when they were able to deploy the solution from one environment to another and also see how the code gets propagated to higher environments. Again, when we build so many pipeline orchestration tools into this DevOps tool set, it's going to complicate. Having GitHub Actions, our teams are able to recognize those deployment patterns and build reusable workflows around those patterns. So if any team is using the same pattern, they would just call that reusable workflow and create their CI/CD pipeline within minutes. So that's where the reusability kicks in, and it helps the team to deliver and adopt the best practice at a faster pace, but also the deliver solution at a faster pace.
Love that. And one of the things which is really close to my heart in what you said there was about bringing quality, obviously the purpose of this session here, but security as well is a part of that quality. And when we think of the inner source idea as well, it's all about community. It's all about bringing together and working for that same overall goal rather than almost what silos can bring and having that maybe friction between those different teams, and bringing security into that workflow, bringing security as just another quality check along the way is such an important part of that, especially in the world today that we live in, where we have some of these critical vulnerabilities that organizations need to react to. If we can just make that part of the flow, part of the cycle, and just make that natural in terms of our developer lifecycle, then it's a win. And I absolutely love that example. So thank you so much for sharing that. Zoe, let's maybe move on to you as well, because from your perspective, organization was using different tooling, consolidated there as well. Similar challenges, similar kind of wins, similar perspectives, or additional thoughts?
Well, definitely, I recognize a lot what Sherin and Adrian already told, but maybe a nice thing to add on that is that when we started to inner source our cloud platform, first, our customers, so to say, they came to us with a question and they had to raise that feature request or a bug on our backlog, and they had to wait a long time. And starting inner source, motivating those people to raise those pull requests themselves or raise an issue. There were a lot of manual tasks eliminated in that process. And by using GitHub projects, for example, with automated workflows that adds those gathers those pull requests and issues onto one board for the cloud team, it's really easy to see what is wished for. And I saw also a question how to encourage people to contribute. Well, this is one major win. People don't have to wait a long time anymore before we have refined stories for their feature requests, put them on the backlog, and now they can contribute themselves. And I think that not having to wait that long again, only for us to having to review their pull request, is a major pro on encouraging people to contribute there.
Super. And there's also some bits we should pull out of that as well. I think this inner source culture that we've been talking about here, where other teams in our organization can contribute into what we do, there's several benefits from that. Like, it all builds upon these DevOps concepts that we're used to and that we're familiar with. So continuous integration, continuous delivery. And the beauty is that those quality checks, so whether the code builds, whether unit tests execute successfully, integration tests, security tests, linting, whatever kind of checks you are relevant for your particular scenario, accessibility testing, that just becomes a check for anyone. So it doesn't matter if you're on that host team and you're the team that maintains that project, or if you're a team somewhere else in the organization contributing in, you still have to meet the same standards. So bringing those DevOps practices that we're familiar with is just part of this natural kind of development life cycle. So it's great because, as you say, that friction between those teams then starts disappearing, because it's not about having to raise the issue with another team. Instead, it's about, right, is this something that is on that team's backlog, yes or no? If it is, great. And they're able to get to work on it soon, great. If they can't, okay. If it's important for us, let's go ahead and actually prioritize that and make that as a contribution to their project from our team. So it really builds this kind of collaboration and fostering this productivity, and quality is really at the center of all of that as well, which is absolutely awesome. And I loved hearing a theme between Sherin, yourself, and between Zoe, all around automation. And I think we'll cover this a little bit later as well. But GitHub Actions, very flexible. Being able to do things like reusable workflows, build those best practices once, and allow the organization to adopt them at scale. But equally, you're not just limited to code. It's not just about building and releasing. You can react to, say, a new issue being created, a project card being created, a milestone being created. So it gives you this ability to automate some of that mundane stuff that actually then allows us as developers and engineers to focus on the important thing, delivering value to our users, building quality into everything that we do. So really awesome to see that there. Interesting poll here actually as well. So while we've been chatting, who in your organization is using GitHub? Probably unsurprisingly, a majority of answers on app developers, followed by data professionals, ops community, and product teams. GitHub is something which any of those groups can use. If you think about your data professionals, they're probably using Jupyter notebooks. They're writing SQL scripts, or SQL queries. Their ops community might be writing Terraform, PowerShell, Bash. Your product teams are probably writing product specs, for example, and design documents and things. All of that could be defined as code. Well, some of that is code. And bringing some of those quality ideas into those processes as well is absolutely something you can do. So interesting to see those results there. Adrian, maybe let's talk about one other thing here in terms of wins as well. And I know before going live, we were talking a little bit about GitHub Copilot, and there's obviously been lots of news over the last week or so with Copilot X as well. How are you finding, from your experience working with customers, that GitHub Copilot wins as well?
It's just yet like another good tool in the toolbox. It's still kind of trying to figure out where it all fits into kind of the adoption of kind of empowering their developers. You see that depending on kind of it's not seniority, but like how well the developer is first in that context, like that it helps them in different ways. Like for juniors, it's not just Copilot, but also kind of the ChatGPT kind of direction where you can interact with it and kind of you learn a lot from it by seeing what it gives you back to you, especially from the context. Well, for seniors, it's more about making you more productive. And one easy way to see these wins is when you allow Copilot to help you write your tests. It lowers the barrier to actually start doing this, which in the end gives this like higher quality of code. And also it will force you to think about what you're actually trying to achieve. Because even if it's wrong or not exactly right, you will have to kind of think like, why was the suggestion wrong? And you're not just blindly copying your implementation you wrote yesterday and just be like, okay, the implementation matches the test, which just tests again the same logic as the implementation has. So to have someone else kind of write tests for you and you having to judge them forces you to think very critically about what you're implementing, whether the test you're implementing is right, and whether the implementation satisfies those business needs. which just is it's kind of different than what we're used to. But yeah, it's definitely like going to be like a nice original way to kind of get better or confidence in your testing quality and your capability to deliver high quality code.
For sure. And it allows us to take away from some of those mundane boilerplate type things, and as you say, focus on that wider problem. And completely right, you know, we can't kind of just accept anything from it. We need to put it through, like any code, we need to put it through the right checks and balances, which again, because we're, let's say, going on this inner source kind of culture, because we're using DevOps principles and baking quality into everything that we do, you know, has to pass a build, has to pass unit tests, has to pass security checks, etc. When we bring that code into what we're doing, it just then goes through the same quality checks because we've built it into our CI/CD workflow. So love that, seeing it all come together there. Good. So then let's keep moving here, because can you believe we're already halfway through the session here? This has been flying by. Let's carry on thinking then about that journey you've been going through. So we were talking about wins just there a moment ago, but of course, to get some of those wins, you need to work with your development community internally. And I use the word community very explicit there because it's in harmony, it's together. You know, you're not working as a separate silo. This absolutely needs to be this kind of cultural journey together. So Sherin, maybe let's start with you. How do you work with your development community? And let's think about things like understanding their challenges, the current developer experience, and how you improve that, for example.
Yeah, so establishing a strong developer community is a must for any organization to be productive. So in our case, the way we try to establish that and collaborate is understanding the tool set that the developers would require, how soon they can get access to those tools that will enable them to do their activities, day-to-day activities, in a much more efficient manner. On top of it, collecting the ideas from what developers would think would better the community or better the organization, we were able to create the GitHub repo and where we can initiate the discussions, right? In these discussions, you can go ahead and start posting the queries. These queries initiate more and more responses that eventually translate an idea into an implementation. You can use the ability to poll certain ideas so that that gets prioritized to implement. So getting that transparency and visibility, how we collaborate, no matter in which time zone we are located in, that adds a lot of value for our practitioners or for our developer community to get the information they need at a super fast level and make use of that information into their day-to-day activities.
Awesome. Thank you. And one maybe follow-up question, if I may. I guess the idea of inner source as well as this community coming together. What perspectives can you share about consuming and contributing as well? Because I guess they're two ends of that inner source way of working, let's say. And maybe sometimes people think they're going to get a free lunch. Suddenly they're going to get lots of contributions coming in. But I guess it's about balance, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is definitely a balance. Wherever we see a strong sense of urgency or need for a specific component that could be reusable for any product. For example, somebody is developing a web application and they need role-based access control. How do we implement that? If we have a reusable component already developed as a part of inner source, this is where making that available to the community and they adopting that component and adding back if they find any issues in that, right? Enhancing that. Consumption is one part. Then if they would like to contribute back and through the enhancements or even logging an issue against it. If something is not working, logging an issue against it is also considered as a contribution back. So when you have multiple developers contributing back from all different time zones and organizations, then the quality of that product or solution gets eventually better. It need not be perfect to begin with, but the community will make it perfect. And eventually everybody starts consuming that so that they don't go with reinventing the same stuff and wasting their time.
Love that. Love that. And I love the point you made there that an issue is a contribution as well. I think that's one of the so common points that I have to make, is that it's not all about code. You know, we can create an issue because maybe the project team that we're working with, they haven't thought about something on their roadmap. And by raising that issue, you're actually making them think about a different problem that their project could solve. And then it creates this constructive discussion around, should we include this in our project? Should we not? And it's absolutely fine if they decide, you know what, we're not going to include it in the project, because it's enabled that discussion and that collaboration, as opposed to that kind of closed world where teams are working in silos and they're just duplicating without even knowing they're duplicating. So it starts bringing the community together. So thank you for sharing that example. Love that. Love that. Zoe, how about yourself in terms of partnering with the developer community? What are you seeing there?
Well, starting our inner source community, it wasn't just like telling the community we are starting inner source now, go ahead and have fun. Would have been great if that works, but that doesn't work, of course. Now we set up at least in the beginning already for the cloud platform special interest groups, and in short, 6, and those 6 had certain topics. For example, automation, security, architecture, and people from the developer community could join those open meetings. So those SIG meetings are open, agenda is published, and you are free to join if you're interested in that topic. And that, of course, had to start. We needed some time until those were known in the community. A few people that did really good marketing for us within the business to reach the right people. And that's how we work together as the core team that works on the cloud platform with our business and the people that we really want to contribute on the project by inner sourcing. So that works quite good for us. Awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing. It's been interesting watching the poll results again whilst we've been chatting again here. Quite a mix of how people are actually improving the quality of their code and the steps they're taking. So about 30% of people are still seeing manual reviews. So I guess pull request is a key part of that. About 28% with automated builds and tests. Not as much on the security checks, interestingly. And then PRs are the only way to merge code into mains. So some really interesting insights there, which I think takes us nicely onto, I think, my favorite question for this session, actually. And I hinted about it a little bit earlier. There's obviously this balance between empowering your developer community, being able to make them be productive, being able to make them ship faster, do more, and build up those kind of standardized patterns and practices, versus guardrails in maybe some of those more regulated or traditional organizations where they need to ensure compliance or ensure certain things are done in a certain way, let's say. How do you balance that inside your organizations? So maybe, Sherin, let's start with yourself. I can imagine that's something top of mind for you.
Yes, I think there definitely need to be a balance between empowerment and putting some guardrails, because end of the day, the solution that you develop gets deployed to production and it will impact hundreds and thousands of end users, right? So in terms of empowerment, bringing the developer community together and providing them the right integrations to integrate code quality and security check. within their and mandating that as a part of their pull request. Every time anybody tries to raise a pull request, it must pass these validation checks. Maybe you are doing sonar cube analysis or dependency scan, right? All these checks must pass along with the unit test coverage. Unit test, then you can go ahead and promote your code and you can approve your pull requests. So these guardrails of having that code quality gates that need to be fulfilled before you promote the code to the higher environment kind of gives you a level of assurance, and you comply with the organization policies that are in many cases mandated, so that you are not just empowered, but you are also following the organization policies to promote the code. One another example between the empowerment and guardrails is, let's say you have the repo. The guardrail here would be, how do we protect our default branches? How do we protect this repo by not having everybody as admin to this repo, right? So those are the guardrails that are required for the sanity of your source code and your application. But from the empowerment perspective, right, how quickly can I get access to this? If I request a write permission to this repo, how quickly can I get it? And is this repo enabled with write checks whenever I make a pull request? So these are the empowerment aspects that you would need to bring in, but you need to balance it out with certain guardrails as well.
For sure. It's whilst you've been talking about that one, we've had a poll going in the background about whether folks are using branch protection rules, which I think is just one of those really easy ways to bring in some of that, some of those guardrails. You know, has someone else reviewed that code before it's merged into your main branch? Have you got those automated checks and balances in place? Reassuring to see a lot of people are. There's still some who are not. So maybe that's an opportunity after the session to go and explore branch protection rules, try them out, and start using them in your organization here as well. Super. So then if we think about, I suppose, these empowerment versus guardrails discussion continuing on here, Adrian, from your perspective, I've seen some chat about GitHub Actions as well in the chat here as well. Lots of love for GitHub Actions here. I think you've got some experiences to share from that front as well, and how that plays a part in this.
Yeah, so when you were saying earlier that like empowering and governance is kind of conflicting, I don't think it always is. At least if empowering is like in the sense of kind of allowing your team to kind of write better code and be more productive. And that's because these guardrails and governance is kind of forcing you to fit to a certain mold, this kind of standardization. And if you use kind of standardized tooling throughout your organization, or you encapsulate this knowledge on how to be compliant, and you allow all the teams to reuse that, then you can both give them this improvement in productivity and at the same time kind of get compliance. And I think GitHub Actions with these like reusable GitHub workflows actually fits that very well. If you both, like, if you allow your all your end users to use these reusable workflows, which built in are compliant with what you need to achieve, then they both get this like empowerment in being more productive and actually can focus on delivering this business value whilst being at the same time compliant. So it's just reframing a bit the problem, and then I think that these are actually quite compatible and probably even more productive at the end of the day.
And I guess really, really valid point, and thank you for picking up on what I said. I guess it's about maybe rethinking how we think about compliance and governance, isn't it? I think it's a bit like security sometimes. It's often thought, maybe in the projects I've been involved in, at least, maybe this is showing maybe some of the scenarios I've worked in, but it's often thought as almost a checkbox or an exercise that happens maybe just once before you go to production, maybe just once before you have to go that initial go live, and then you've done it and everything's fine. But when you can start automating things in that way and bring them as checks into your life cycle from a development perspective, bring those compliance checks, bring those quality checks, bring those just standards, whether the code builds, testing, etc., etc. When it starts becoming part of the life cycle, it becomes repeatable. and it becomes less. There's less friction in that experience then as well, and you get the quality.
As long as there's not all the teams have to solve how to get that checkbox checked every time, then you kind of see the upside. If you see compliance that there's something every team need to deal with themselves, then it's going to be a huge bottleneck, and then indeed it will kind of conflict. So yeah, try to solve it as a communal problem rather than every team for themselves.
Yep, which comes back to, I think, some of the discussions we've had here around reusable workflows and being able to share at scale, and that idea of empowerment versus guardrails, doesn't it? Good. And Zoe, from your perspective as well, please.
Yes, I think those guardrails are really important in our company, and we always try to think of how we can better guard our code and what's being deployed, but also make it user friendly. So that is the most important part, I think, in inviting people to contribute, but also have those guardrails up. And the way that we try to make it most user-friendly is to have it all automated. So having code owners in place, people can immediately see who is the code owner on that repository. Having those branch protection rules, for example, having at least a minimum of 2 reviewers per pull request. And having automated tests on pull requests that automatically run, so that the people who raise those pull requests can easily see what is wrong, or if their PR is completely according to standards. And having that transparency makes it more easy to have that conversation with your community. Also, what I said in the beginning of this talk is that everybody in our organization is reader on all repositories, and everybody can join those special interest groups, but you are not automatically a writer on those repositories. So if you are in those special interest groups, you get write permissions on those pieces of code, and via that way we give we trust you with your additions to the code, and that is how we try to work with the community, but having those guardrails.
And that's such an important word there, trust. And it, Inner Source fundamentally relies upon this, doesn't it? Is that you all trust each other in this community. And again, bringing it back to, it's not just about the tooling, even though we've kind of hinted at it a lot in the session. There's this cultural transformation that happens alongside as well, all of this that we're talking about here. One thing I'd love to just pull out as well, and we can do maybe a quick yes or no, and in the chat as well, maybe if you want to join in with this. Code owners. Are we using code owners files? Maybe Zoe, start with you.
Yeah, we are.
Nice.
On every repository, I think.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, we do use.
And Adrian, from your perspective, are you seeing lots of organizations use that as well?
Yeah, especially once they get bigger. The small ones, they tend not to care too much because everyone knows everything. But once you get bigger, you do need that to structure and to get some control, keep the control.
Gotcha. It's interesting reading the chat as well. Quite a few yeses, some no's. So again, branch protection rules, code owners, great ways of being able to bring that those checks and balances along the way. So if there are certain parts of the code where maybe they're a little bit more sensitive, or you need certain teams to review it for whatever reason, a great way to enforce that as part of what you're doing then. Good. So I'm conscious that we're very much coming up to the end of our time here. Again, it's flown by. Let's maybe start closing here with some of our thoughts in terms of, if you were doing this all again, what would be some of those things that you wish you knew before you started? Maybe some of those tips, tricks, wisdom, however you want to call it. What is it that you wish you'd known before you started on the journey? So let's start with Sherin, yourself.
Yeah, I think if we would have done it a little bit differently, we would have much more focused on establishing the developer community, right? Where we will be able to share all these migration tools. You want to migrate from multiple version controls back to GitHub. How do you do that efficiently? Drive that automation in terms of migration of your source code and integrations to GitHub. And also ability to communicate better with your practitioner communities with constant trainings, with constant upskilling that is required. Not everybody is in the same pace. So that upskilling and training aspect is very important. And also recognize the subject matter experts in your organization who are willing to go above and beyond to come and share their experience and learnings. There could be some tricks and tips and tricks that they implemented for their source to the inner source community, makes the journey much more interesting and collaborative and much more productive.
Excellent. Great insights. Thank you, Sherin. Zoe, maybe yourself next.
Yes, I was thinking during Sharon's talk what my wish was that we had done sooner, and I would say coming back to what Sherin also mentions about recognizing your SMEs, even though as a team within the organization, you are the code owners and in the end responsible for that code. Recognize somebody from a whole different team that is really interested and really wanting to contribute. It took quite some time to have that trust in those people, and that is a learning curve, of course. But knowing that now that we are well underway already, I would say have that trust. Just repeating what basically we already said, and also that you don't have to be afraid to fail. So don't try and think everything out on forehand and try to make the best way of working. You will stumble across certain things on the road. Don't be afraid to face those challenges, because in the end, they will help you to get a better way of working.
Love that. I think I prefaced the session with this idea of the cloud world we live in being always on expectations. And I think that's one of the things from a cloud perspective. We expect infrastructure to fail because that's kind of nature of cloud. And it's important when we think about this cultural journey we're going on. Failure is going to happen. We're making some big changes here comparing to how we'd worked in the past. And actually at GitHub, we have a principle that we work by, which is ship to learn. And this idea that, it might not be perfect, but it's an enhancement. It's a change. It's something that we're growing and improving over time. So absolutely that ship to learn mentality and that idea of being able to continually grow is so important in this transformation here. Adrian, how about yourself in terms of the organizations you've worked with here? Are there kind of any retrospectives they've been through that are common that you see?
Yeah, and it might be a bit like very generic advice, but I think it holds very specifically true still to all the migrations to like GitHub, is like take future costs into account when kind of deciding what to do next. Like, because this kind of like ongoing maintenance is indefinite, even though like you have short-term like upfront kind of costs to do the migration or not to do it, or to do it in a specific way, and then we kind of like blindly staring at it like this upfront cost without like really pushing through all the way. And even though it might hurt today, like just kind of focus on getting everything migrated and try to do it quickly. And in that path, especially try to kind of make use of the full kind of tool, not just pick only the Git provider and be like, oh, we'll later do it. No, like try to pull everything over ASAP. Because yeah, like you get away with it today, but then tomorrow you have someone kind of maintaining that old solution, and the day after and the day after. So in the same way that you have like compounding productivity, you get this kind of like, you're just stacking more of this technical debt or this maintenance burden onto your team and organization, which eventually will hold you back. And it might be I don't know, tough call to make that you have to push through, but yeah, almost strong.
Awesome. And I think if I encapsulate some of my thoughts here, what we've been talking about as well, the inner source journey has been a theme, I think, even though we've been talking about quality, has really been a theme that has threaded throughout all of the discussion, through the examples from everyone here. And I think what's been really interesting is hearing just how broadly you're using GitHub. You know, it's not just the version control. It's not just we're using actions here and we're doing this and this and this. You're using it as this end-to-end platform to help you bring security into that lifecycle, to help you be more productive, to bring that collaboration amongst your teams with that inner source platform. So hearing that end-to-end, the platform, you know, from code all the way to then using actions, being able to use like reusable workflows to scale that across the organization and empower developers, bringing things like advanced security into that to then bring those quality checks just as part of what developers do, and then they release to production, is really the foundation of what we've been talking about with this session, is bringing quality into everything that you do and being able to build our development community up in such a way that they can fall into the pit of success, so that they're able to not have to keep reinventing the wheel, but instead we can empower them, know they've got the right building blocks in place that they can be productive and carry on focusing, shipping more, shipping to learn, and growing more as a community. So really, really awesome session. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here. Just as you can see on screen here as our final closing poll, we've got how folks are governing CI/CD adoption across their organization. Interesting to see the love for reusable workflows. That's the highest one there voted for. Still a lot of room to go though. So if folks are experimenting with GitHub Actions, definitely one worth trying out, as I've seen it mentioned a ton of times in the chat, come up a few times in the discussions here as well. So definitely one to look at. Passwordless deployments. I'd be a bit biased. I wrote a blog post in January about that, which I think is awesome. So you should definitely all go check that out. But again, a great feature to help reduce toil and things like that. And again, just allow the community to focus on what's important rather than the operational overhead of things, delivering value to the end users. So really, really interesting insights throughout the session there. So folks, thank you so much for joining. I think I'll move us on now to closing thoughts, what's coming up for the rest of Galaxy. So again, panel, thank you for joining, and feel free to jump backstage if you'd rather. Thank you. Good. So folks, we're coming to the end of our time here. So just to make sure you're aware of everything that is coming up in terms of GitHub Galaxy, we are day one here today, which is very much focused on productivity. So we've just had the fireside chat this morning. We have another session later this afternoon, how GitHub's tooling and resources are uniquely designed for developers. I've had a sneak peek of that one. That's going to be awesome. So I recommend definitely going and checking that one out later today. Tomorrow is very much focused on security. So how to implement native security patterns that deliver customer value and optimize the developer experience. And then in the afternoon tomorrow, how a global community of security researchers can help you scale your security team. Because again, security is one of these things that is a cornerstone of what we do. So how can we build on top of this amazing community that is out there and help bring security into what we do every day? So go ahead and check that one out tomorrow. And then Friday is about collaboration. So how to increase developer productivity by investing in efficient tooling. So I'm sure there'll be very similar themes and discussions to what we've had here today. And then in Friday afternoon, reducing DevOps toolchain complexity with GitHub. So some great sessions coming up. Recommend you go and check those out. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Just as a reminder, if there have been questions in the chat that we haven't been able to handle during the discussion, because we've had a very full-on session here, and please use the button at the top of the screen to book a meeting. We'd love to be able to carry on that discussion further with you. And of course, like any of these kind of events, we'd love your feedback. So if you could please take the time just to scan the QR code on the screen and take a couple of minutes just to fill out the survey, we would greatly appreciate your help there. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you on another stream very soon. Thanks for joining, and bye for now.